Just following on from Deputy MacDonald in relation to this matter, and obviously you can accuse us of hindsight, but I'm still looking, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at the Controller and Auditor General's report to try and be fair to all parties. And Mr Collison, you said I didn't outline questions that you hadn't answered. Isn't that right? Yeah, to be fair to you, you said I haven't. So let me just look at page, I can pick at random, 3 major chapters. If I pick page 95, conclusions, and he sets out 6 conclusions, and I haven't seen you or any of your colleagues deal with those conclusions. So if we look at conclusion 1, and again, you can see I won't have time to read out the 6 conclusions, but I'll take the gist of each one. Mr Cushnahan's declared involvement with NAMA debtors whose loans represented at least half of the Northern Ireland loan book meant that a potential conflict of interest arose that would not be managed sufficiently by the withholding of debtor-specific information. And then the conclusion, NAMA should have formally considered whether Mr Cushnahan's engagement in discussion of its Northern Ireland strategy and so on. You see that? And each paragraph he sets out a conclusion. I would have expected you to come back with all of this time and to say we don't agree with that or we do agree with that.
I suppose, Deputy, in relation to the conflict management piece, it wasn't an area that I was particularly involved in at all. This was a matter for our board and conflicts of interest.
But that's fair enough, so you can't comment any of your colleagues on this matter. But
not
the
on
legal
that
team, perhaps
matter.
the legal team would have a role in conflict of interest, surely.
Again, speaking for myself, Deputy, I wasn't aware of any conflicts involved with Mr Cushnan. I didn't really even know who he was, as I explained earlier on at the time, so I didn't even know he had any involvement with debtors.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot more than Mr Cushnan involved.
No, but the paragraph you've just read out.
Well, I read the
Mr.
6.
Cushnan.
The whole chapter is on conflict of interest. It also leads on to Cerberus.
Sure, but we're jumping ahead. I'm just referring to the paragraph you just read out.
Yeah, no, my difficulty is I have so many minutes. I'm referring to the 6 conclusions. I would have expected you to come in and deal with each conclusion.
Deputy, this was, and I'm not trying to sidestep the issue at all, this was such a really, really important issue that the matters in relation to success fee payments, Frank Cushnan and so on, were matters that were dealt with by the board that were of the utmost importance.
No, I accept that. But if we look at the board, just look, and I go back to a different chapter, the sale process, which the Controller and Auditor General highlighted a number of controls with the sale problems. We look at page 72. Page 72. And this is something you do have experience in, Mr Collison, because you've made a comment on the bidders. On the 13th of February, there was a national press report that PIMCO had approached NAMA. So, in other words, the story broke. Despite all your story broke, it's now open. And the NAMA board held a normal scheduled meeting on the day that the press article was published. Project Eagle was a planned agenda item. Although strict confidentiality had been a key project objective, so on and so on, neither the media report nor the breach of confidentiality are mentioned in the board minutes. The only evidence that the board reconsidered its objectives for the process is that the minutes record that the board gave Lazard and the NAMA executive, that's yourselves presumably, the flexibility to increase the number of bidders if genuine credible interest arose. That's the only. Now, for me looking on, that's not a dealing with a serious issue. And you're saying that's the board.
That's recorded in the board minute of the 13th of February.
That's right.
And that was the instruction and you're absolutely right. It coincides with the story breaking in the media and the board basically giving the licence to Asset Recovery and in turn Lazard to increase the number of bidders.
Absolutely. We'll come to your role, but you can't comment on that. You're not the board.
No, but I was at that board meeting.
Okay, and that's an accurate reflection of the board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's no sense that they're taking this seriously. There's a huge breach in confidentiality.
Breach in confidentiality?
It's now in the papers that PIMCO have approached NAMA.
Okay, but that certainly wasn't.
But you see, I don't think you've read the report. I actually don't think NAMA has. I think that what you've done is you've zoned in on the 5.5% and the 10%, and you've spin might be a strong word, but that's what I believe. And you, at every opportunity, have come forward and zoned in on this. and a difference of opinion, as opposed to what the actual report is saying.
But I can only tell you, Deputy, my experience at the time and my recollection at the time, and the sales process had been kept quite confined. I suppose we kept it to a limited number of bidders on the instructions of the board. At that point, the board basically gave flexibility to say, if there's anyone else out there that fits the profile, Lazard now has the authority to go in and actually invite them into the process.
Okay, just continuing on the last paragraph on that page. Following the media coverage, NAMA and our Lazard received inquiries from a further 10 firms. 2 of these, Goldman Sachs and Fortress, were allowed to enter the process. Lazard informed NAMA that it had excluded the other 8 firms, 7 of whom it said were well known to Lazard and had excellent reputations. So they're just not allowed in.
I suppose, just at the risk of repeating myself, Lazard were aware, Deputy, on the 13th of February that there was that flexibility was provided. So they were told, if there's anyone else who fits this profile, they can be invited into the process. There's now an opportunity to do that. And between what I would record as the 4th of February and the 14th of February, there were a number of bidders approached. There were others that subsequently came forward, and we asked Lazard for an assessment at the time based on what we were trying to achieve. Were these investors the right fit? Did they have the financial capacity? And for a number of reasons, 2 of them were accepted, but others weren't. And we acted on the instructions and the advice of our loan and sales advisor at the time. There were, and bear in mind, and again, I don't want to be argumentative about this, but we sat down initially with the original bidders that were approached. We told them that this was a bespoke process. There was a limited number of parties that would be invited, and that was the message that they were given at the time. That was why they were invited into the process, and it wasn't a case then that we could, I suppose, take a completely different approach at that stage.
When I read it, I see a very limited approach. Starting with 3 bidders, and we've said this so often, it was kept deliberately small for a small number of people. Other firms were excluded. You yourself have come in here today and said, if I underbid, there would have been a lot more bidders. The reality is there were a lot more bidders that were kept out. Just let me finish, because it didn't suit the strategy, and that's entirely your business. However, what I read from the Controller and Auditor General is you did not justify that. You didn't explain it, and that's the theme throughout all of this.
But Deputy, the firms that were either invited or approached to participate in Project Eagle, they accounted for 90% of the loan sales activity in the marketplace. So Lazard confirmed to us on more than one occasion the right parties, the right number of parties and the right actual parties are in the data room, and we had to take their advice on that.
I don't accept that, and I don't accept that that's what you're misinterpreting. Ye actually told Lazard. This is one of the points made in the report, and if you go back and read it, you will see that he's saying, the Controller and Auditor General's office is saying this differs from other types of sale, that Lazard had a very limited role compared with other sales advisors, and 1, 2, 3 they were told what to do. And significantly, and you've answered, Deputy MacDonald, and I'm not happy with the answer. I don't know why Lazard weren't informed why PIMCO withdrew, because they couldn't give a reasoned opinion without being told. And they came back and suitably told you there's sufficient competition, but they didn't know what they were talking about because they hadn't been given the adequate information.
But we didn't direct Lazard, Deputy. Lazard are a huge international advisory firm, a global firm.
According to the board, you directed Lazard. According to your minutes, you told Lazard. It was set out what they should and shouldn't do.
But what I'm saying is we certainly gave them instructions, and they were aware of the mandate at the time, and they were obviously aware that on the 13th of February that there was an opportunity to invite more bidders into the process. But when it came to the recommendation around those bidders and who qualified and who didn't, we took their advice. We didn't tell them, no, we don't want that firm and we do want that firm. We actually took their advice on those recommendations.
My time up?
Last question.
In relation, I'm going back to be very careful, and in relation to Brown Rudnick. It's our understanding here that the board didn't know about this till the 2nd or the 3rd of April. They didn't know that Brown Rudnick and Tuhans were involved with Cerberus. Isn't that correct?
3rd of April is the date.
3rd of April. I was trying to be fair to you. Someone probably knew before the 3rd. So the 2nd or 3rd of April. Now, it seems to me from the documentation that was submitted today by Mick Wallace, which I haven't had a chance to go into in detail, that Cerberus are clearly saying that NAMA knew about the legal people that they had employed well before the bid was accepted.
Yes.
That Cerberus had employed Brown Rudnick and Tuhans, and that NAMA were aware of this prior to the bid on the 1st of April. It's a yes or no, you know.
Well, I don't think it is.
Is it not? Okay.
But I will need a moment to answer,
Okay,
if I may.
okay.
Like I say, I wasn't involved in the third, but we were aware that Linklaters and Good Buddies were acting for Cerberus,
Yes.
and they were active in the data room, and that can clearly be shown.
Yes.
If what is being said is that prior to the bid being accepted, Cerberus told NAMA about Brown Rudnick, they told NAMA about Brown Rudnick, as I understand it, on the 3rd of April. The bid acceptance was maybe.
Yeah,
the bid was made in the first. Sorry, no, the bid was made in the first. Just to be clear, the bid acceptance is what I'm talking about. The bid acceptance was on the.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not arguing over one,
on the
two.
3rd.
I'm not arguing. No, just a second. I'm not arguing.
Just a second.
I'm not arguing over 1, 2, or 3 days. I'm saying prior to that time.
But that seems to me to have been a number of hours prior, Deputy.
No. Prior. I'll take prior to the 1st of April. We'll just take that as the cut-off point. Was NAMA aware that Brown Rudnick and Tuhans were acting for Cerberus? Absolutely no.
There was an email that came into NAMA on the 3rd of April from Cerberus to NAMA, which states that the law firm Brown Rudnick were retained as strategic advisor.
Just please, I'm asking a question because I'm stuck for time. Prior to the 1st of April, it's a yes or no question.
No knowledge.
No, yes or no?
No.
No, that's fine.
As far as I'm aware, no.
And now I understand as well from the documentation submitted that there's a no-ness on the legal advisors or the property advisors to tell NAMA that NAMA actually asked through Lazard, please tell us who your advisors are. Did that happen?
Cerberus, yeah, when Linklaters and Good Buddies were put forward as Cerberus advisors, we were told that and they were allowed access to the data room.
My question, is there an obligation on the bidder or any bidder to specifically set out in writing who their legal advisors are, who their property advisors are?
Not for legal advisors. I think there's a distinction there. The NDA makes a distinction there. So for legal advisors, it's not specifically required that they set them out. For property advisors and for other advisors, I think as well, I'd have to look at the NDA to be absolutely sure of this, Deputy, so I would need to go and double check it. But my understanding is for other advisors, there is an obligation to say what they are. So if they're legal advisors, there's a distinction.
This is my 3rd time today asking this question, and you're here and you know more than we do. And it's crucial, and we've gone around in circles asking when NAMA became aware that Cerberus had the same set of legal advisors and the same set of... You're telling me not before the 3rd of April. I'm asking you now a slightly different question. Is there an obligation on the bidder to tell NAMA who their advisors are, regardless? Now, you're coming back to me, just to be clear, and I'll finish on it. Yes for property advisors, yes for other advisors, but not for legal.
I believe that's correct. I would have to check the wording of the NDAs. It's quite a specific point that goes back to the wording of a clause in the NDA, so I would need to check that, Deputy, to give you